Welcome everyone to our webinar about inclusive early childhood education. We will record this webinar, so please be aware of that if you speak. We are happy to have today with us Mr. Aniane Lebret. She is our sign language interpreter and she will translate the webinar. I am Veronica Fernandez and I work at the GIZ-Research Project on Inclusive Education in Development Cooperation. This is the second of a webinar series about inclusive education and other related topics. The objective of this row of webinars is to present the Science to Policy Brief. These are publications that the GIZ developed on behalf of the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. The objective of this Science to Policy Brief is to give an overview about inclusive education and other related topics, such as accessibility, refugees, ICT, so information and communication technology, and early childhood education. The publications include promising practices, research activities, and concrete recommendations for the practical implementation in projects. So we are happy to have today with us Professor Reinhard Markowetz and Mr. Klaus Jahn, both from the Ludwigs-Maximilians-University of Munich, and they will present the Science to Policy Brief about early childhood education. After the presentation, they will discuss with you and answer the questions you may have about this topic. Before we start, I would like to show you some functions that you can use the whole time during the webinar. So, we will start with the chat function. You can find the chat room on the left side of your screen. You can use the chat to write comments or ask questions, but please be aware that the questions should be made after the presentation is finished, because we won't be able to answer it before. You can choose if you write to the whole group, recipient all, or just to one person. Then I will like to explain you how the microphones work. Your microphone is now gray. That means that it has been turned off by the moderator and you cannot change it. If you want to ask a question after the presentation, I will turn your microphone in red and then you can click on it in order to activate it. Once the microphone is activated, it will be green, like my microphone now, because I'm now speaking and everyone can hear me. So, and then I would like to show you the emoticons. I will start with the icon on the very left, the raise hands icon. You can use it just to ask a question or make a comment. I will call them on you, and once your question has been answered, please click again on it in order to turn it off. If the moderator or the presenters ask a question, you can answer yes by clicking in the green icon, and similarly, if the answer is no, you can click on the red X. Then we have two emoticons to give positive feedback, the laughing symbol and the applaud symbol. So if you really like something or you want to say thank you, you can clap your hands and we will know that you are satisfied. And last but not least, we have the step out icon. You can use the icon if you leave the webinar just for a short while. For example, if you have to answer the phone, but you are coming back to the webinar, so we can know that you are not available at the moment. So please these icons the whole time, but questions just after the presentation is finished. And yeah, I have introduced myself and we would like to know who is today with us. So we would like that you introduce yourself. That's why I will just ask two questions. The first one is, for which organization do you work? Could you please choose an answer? Oh, great. 2 persons, 3, 4 have already answered. We will wait just a second. So, and then we will see the results. 20%, most of people, 20% are working for multilateral organization, and then we have the second one is civil society organizations. Yeah, very interesting. And the second question is, do you have experience in the field of early childhood education? Please answer. I see that 10 people have already answered. So, I will show the results. So, 50-50. I think it would be great for the discussion, because we have experienced people and people that do not know very much about the topic. So, I think it would be great. And now, I will pass the floor to Professor Markowetz and Klaus Jahn, and I will virtually clap my hands in order to welcome them. Thank you.
Okay, a warm welcome to everybody from Munich, and greetings from me and Klaus into the world. Hope you are fine and awake. It's a pleasure for us to have you on board, and it's good to know that you are interested in inclusion and in early childhood education. We hope that you are well and safe connected with the internet, can hear us clear and loud enough so that you can follow us for the next 1 hour while our session and web conference. Well, maybe you can hear English is not my mother language, and normally I prefer to talk in French while conferences like this. So I will speak slowly and in simple sentences, this in the hope that everybody can understand what I mean. If not, give us a sign. Okay, our topic and theme today is early childhood education. Let us look at the first slide. And maybe please write down all your questions while we are speaking now, so that we can discuss afterwards problems and challenges. Okay, you can see some words from Werner Munoz, who is the UN rapporteur on education. He has a big sentence. There are 1 billion children aged under 8 years old in the world, more than 20% of the world's population. The neglect of these children's rights and the consequent impact on their other rights, their opportunities and their societies, is too devastating to continue. So, very important for us and for our presentation. Okay, on the next slide, Klaus and me will entertain you along the following points. You see background, we will give you some background information, overview on research activities, key research findings, some data and knowledge engineering, some examples for implementation of research results in practice, and then at least science to policy and practice implications. Okay, so when we start, you can see what is the term. For interventions with young children, including health and nutrition, childcare, education and parent support, is necessary. Also necessary to work in an interdisciplinary team, education together with care, health, nutrition, to encourage the holistic development of children. Furthermore, it's important to know that we have different age groups. Infants, preschoolers and children of lower and primary school classes, what means that we have children from 0 to 8, 9 years old. The challenges that we have few programs for under 3 years old children. We have rare access for low-income families, little standardization and transparency, and lack of qualified personnel. So data shows that many children have no access to appropriate early education opportunities, as a result of which they miss out on opportunities in later life. So, last point from our background information sheet, promising practices. The UNICEF program abolition of school fees, sorry for that, provision of social cash transfers, mobile kindergartens, compulsory preschool education shows what can be possible. Okay, on our next slide, Klaus will entertain you.
Yes, warm welcome from my side too. In our study, we actually found out or saw first that there is many different words, terms are being used for early childhood education, from early childhood care, early childhood education and care, early childhood development, etc. Depending on the organization working on it, depending on the offers, with slightly different focuses as well. Through our study, we decided to talk about early childhood education, knowing exactly that the English term of education has much more content than the German term of education. Also knowing exactly that it's very important to combine multidisciplinary health, nutrition, childcare, education and parent support. As a general information, we found out that there's a lack of research on the triads, early childhood education, inclusion and development cooperation. We found quite a number of studies on early childhood education, we found some on inclusion, we found on development cooperation, sometimes also two of them mixed together, but all the three it was quite difficult. We also saw that most research results are from bilateral and multilateral agencies as well as from non-governmental organizations. They often use in-house capacity for research and data collection and less often services of research institutes and universities. Even less we found complete independent researches of universities and research institutes, which would give more valid data to the topic. Let me come to selected research activists and networks. From the bilateral organizations, you have UNESCO, you have UIS, the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, you have IBE, the International Bureau of Education, who took up inclusive education as a big role within UNESCO. You have, of course, UNICEF, you have l'OMEP, the Organisation Mondiale de l'Éducation Préscolaire. You have the World Health Organization as well as the World Bank and some others. As from the bilateral organizations, you have also quite many who are active in the area and also cooperate with research institutes. Just to name one here, the DFID, the British one, network on research institutes on governance, social development, humanitarian and conflict issues, who also does some research on inclusion and a minor part here also on early childhood. We have quite a number of NGOs active here, just to mention Save the Children, Childhood Poverty Research and Policy Center, which was founded, CHIP, and the super program Safe University Partnerships for Education Research. You also have a number of partnerships, one founded by the World Health Organization for maternal, newborn and child health. Then you have the Global Campaign for Education, who also has the topic of early childhood education, who provides data, information, and policy recommendations. Also on various topics, including early childhood education, disability, gender, financing, policy recommendations, practical examples, as well as tools. It's also very impressive if you look to network sites. They have databases where you can also find tools already. You can find information to look deeper into it. And actually, at the end of our study, we also have a list with references, and there's an additional list with interesting links on the topic, which you can go deeper into it. Of course, in 15 pages, we could only give a brief overview on the topic. There's also the Global Child Development Group, which focuses on children. Here, partners from the South and the North are organized in meetings, in exchange opportunities, and also do research together. Also here on the web, you can find some information, data, resources. From here, we would like to go to the key research findings. First, as a general matter, on early childhood education, it's very important for the emotional, physical, cognitive, and social development. And we saw throughout all the studies that early childhood education is a gate opener for schooling, training, job opportunities, and later chances in life. The services should include positive neonatal conditions, safe environment, secure parental ties, care and trust, sufficient and well diet, adequate hygienic conditions, and health care. Stimulating pedagogical offers, play, and when necessary, early assistance in families and institutions. Here on our slide you see a picture on a classroom in Ethiopia, actually, for early childhood education, and you see how crowded it is and how difficult schooling under this condition, schooling and development under this condition is. Also, I just mentioned the cognitive development and the role of play in it, and you see how difficult in this situation it will be to foster these items. On the chart you see from preschool up to post-school, how is the effects of education, and you can see that the major effects take place through preschool. So Canero and Heckman proved that early childhood education compared to other educational phases have the highest long-term effects on learning and on later life, as well as on job opportunities. This goes in line with the fact that the major brain development takes place in the first 3 years. This means all the connections in the brain, all the synapses are by 100% completed after the age of 3. They even reduce until the age of 18 again to 60%. If it's going to the speeding up processes of operations in the brain, this is completed by the age of 10. So also here again, the early years of childhood are very important for brain development. From this more theoretical view on child development, we come to key research findings within early childhood education and development cooperation. There's one very interesting meta-analysis of Rao and others of 70 studies in 30 developing countries. He proved that early childhood education has very positive effects on cognitive development. The greatest effects are from holistic programs where parental support, nutrition, health, and education are combined in one program. And there's a strong correlation between well-qualified educators, medical staff, and the learning progresses. We ourselves did a study together with the German Kindernothilfe in 9 countries on 3 continents in 15 of their projects. And we found out that training programs for educators and parents seem to be most effective. So if you if you need to focus your interventions, then educators and parents play a major role in the education of children. There's a very importance on the play of children, on the psychological support, on the right-based approaches, as well as networking of different stakeholders. The satisfaction of staff and emotional relations of children were proven equally important. This means if the staff don't have the appropriate work environment, also quality of services provided will be lower. And again, emotional relations with the children are really a key opener for development. This is on parents' emotional relations, but also educators and teachers' emotional relations to the children. There's a slight relation between health and educational effects, and we also saw a medium correlation between hygiene and education. Last but not least, we found out that targeted interventions are more effective in the short term than broad interventions. Broad participatory interventions, again, might be more sustainable in the long run. Interesting for all of you could be there has been a tool developed for the evaluation of early childhood education and development. So if you have time to look into that study, it will be interesting. I think it will be soon translated into English. PISA, all of you know, as a worldwide global study, many countries participate. Here, a positive relationship between the school performance of 15 years old youth and the attendance of at least 1 year of early childhood has been proven. By the way, we also saw one study where 1 year early childhood education can have an impact on less costs for the government of 300% during the life of the child. Let's continue with some numbers on the success. The government's expanded pre-primary education enrollment rates increased by 2/3 since 1999. So this means education for all and global global targets have been successful. There has been a significant raise of preschool teachers, but not yet reaching the suggested pupil-teacher ratio by 15:1. If you look again to the chart, you see it's quite different by region, and it's even more different by country. What are the successes? And you see again, Central Asia, the Arab states and Sub-Saharan Africa still have a problem with pre-primary gross enrollment ratio because it's less than 40% still these days, and Sub-Saharan Africa even less than 20%. It's also alarming that in some Arab states the numbers of are even going backwards. The challenges in this respect are the countries do not meet the recommended spending on early childhood education of 1% of the GDP. Only about 20% of the children in developing countries attend early childhood education programs. This is not just the offer side, this is also, we saw, the side of the demand. It's not yet in the public that early childhood education is necessary. It's not yet seen by families, it's not yet seen so much by communities, so there's also a question of how to increase the demand side, not just the offer side. Children of marginalized societal groups are still the education losers, so handicapped children, poor children, minority groups, etc. Barriers to education, like the lack of access, learning materials or qualified teachers are still a big issue. Access, physical access, but also hearing access, also visual access, ways to school, bridges are spoiled, there are many issues. And there are still gender differences in enrollment rates. Yet, as you see in big letters below, early childhood education seems not to be a priority in development cooperation. Now I hand over again to Reinhard for giving you the data on information on data and knowledge engineering.
Yeah, as you heard, we have a lot of information about early education. We have most research results from bilateral and multilateral agencies, non-governmental organizations, but often in-house capacities, research and data. So what we need is we need more and further data and knowledges, and so that's why you can see we have some recommendations for further data and knowledges engineering. For example, we need studies covering the trias between inclusive education, development cooperation, and early childhood and care education. What we need, could be good to involve more universities for independent studies for more valid results. And we had to develop a network of networks for improved coordinations. And maybe it's also really necessary to develop a data bank with all existing relevant data, documents and links for everybody who is interested in these topics. Okay, so on the next slide, Klaus will give some information about different paths in early childhood education.
Yes, Reinhard already mentioned there are different paths to be followed, or countries and development partners followed to increase access in early childhood education. This again makes it very interesting to learn from each other, because you can see how things worked and how some things also didn't work. And here again research comes in and more needs for research comes in. In Jamaica, for example, a 2-year home visiting program took place for 9 to 24 months old children. And the focus was on mother-child interaction for positive play. And here long-time effects after 20 years have been seen on societal development. In Brazil, they had a national campaign for the right to education, Funded for Real. Here they introduced full early childhood education from the age of 0. They introduced minimum standards for education, quality education. They increased the appreciations of teachers, which is a problem globally now, that the teacher's profession is not appreciated as much as it should be. And with this, of course, it's more difficult to get teachers. And they also increased government accountability, which is also important for the public to see. In Pakistan, the Teachers Resource Center developed a curriculum and specialized teacher training for early childhood education due to the lack of national guidelines before. So in the same line, they strengthened the importance of early childhood education and the topics which mentioned before on other programs. In Senegal, they had the project on Cas de tout petit, case of the small children, as a holistic approach aiming to ensure access to early childhood care and education for all. Here they supported children and parents and the children for the intellectual, psychomotor, social and emotional development, as well as health, nutrition, financial issues and counseling of parents. In India, you have UMID's Early Childhood Development and Disability Training Program to support high-risk communities with visits of trained community health workers. They go to families to monitor the development, and they're using the strength-based approach. This means not looking to what the child can't do, look what is the child's abilities and how can you support the child's development through its abilities. Yes, based on these findings, we were looking into what recommendations can be worked out from these findings. Of course, there are many recommendations in many studies, and we tried to gather them, knowing exactly that new sustainable development goals have been agreed. And so we decided to use this new sustainable development goal, exactly goal 4 on education and its sub-goals, to structure the recommendations. So as you know, the goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, is our goal for the next 15 years, 14 now. Sub-goal 1, access to quality early childhood development care and pre-primary education. It's recommended to have campaigns for the appraisal and introduce compulsory early childhood education. This is a task of the international community, national governments, as well as local responsibility stakeholders. You can do this through radio, TV, press visits. More importantly, also show examples, good practices, how this can result also in better life for children and also in improved societal conditions. Governments again have to develop early childhood education frameworks and policy coordination mechanisms. Donors and governments have to increase funding provisions. Programs and activities and budgets for more effective planning and implementation have to be done. And the development and implementation of monitoring systems and research projects. Here in the last point, it's interesting to look into how general education is being monitored and researched, so best possibly also to integrate measures on early childhood education within the main existing monitoring systems and research systems. Of course, there's a problem of different responsible ministries, so there is the need of collaboration between the ministries. Also, social education, it's from country to country very different. Second sub-goal, eliminate gender disparities in education and ensure equal access for all. This also targets children with disability. This also targets children of minority groups and other disadvantaged groups. Here, there's the need to develop, pass and implement anti-discrimination laws and measures. This is the government, also development with assistance of development partners. Of course, also the stakeholders need to play an important role in this. Amend and implement laws and national education plans on inclusive early childhood education. We have also seen in some countries they have the laws, everything is already prepared, but implementation is not there. So here, governments needs to strengthen implementation with the support of development partners as well as stakeholders. There's the need to reduce inequalities through targeted intervention and risk factors, as they are nutrition, health, education, poverty, things we mentioned before. And there is the the need to ensure inclusive development in all areas, implementation, monitoring, research, financial and technical support. With the next two sub-goals, my colleague Reinhard will continue.
Looks good. Okay, as you can see, we have two more implications. The one is we must build and upgrade education facilities. That means that we must overcome barriers in participation in education experienced by any pupils through inclusive institutions development. And we had to reform, we need reforms of the education provisions, especially in terms of curriculum, assessment, pedagogy and grouping of pupils. And the last point of this implication is we need also educational institutes and classrooms who are accessible and relevant and for all. Last but not least, we had to increase the supply of qualified teachers for ECE. So we had to make sure a high standard and qualification of teachers who are working in early childhood education on the same level, on a level with primary school teachers through pre- and in-service trainings. We had to develop and we had to improve curricula and pedagogy for ECE. It's furthermore necessary developments, trainings and implementation of holistic approaches for ECE. And we need sufficient numbers of trained ECE teachers, improve their working conditions, inclusive, regular and appropriate income. And the last point is we had to think to the child health and nutrition as well as need for cognitive and psychosocial support into mainstream curricula and adult education. So maybe like a summary, the next and last slide is a picture from me from my last visit in Canada. I saw this beautiful picture who says, sing early, sing often, because the first years are so important. And that's so good that now in Target 4.2 we have early learning, a focus on early learning in our education goals for the next years. Okay, so much for the moment. Thank you for your attendance. But now it's time, I think, to talk to each other, to answer questions and discuss our issues. Let's talk about early childhood education. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I guess that the participants have already questions or comments. If so, please raise your hands and I will give you the floor. Just click on the icon with the hands and I will see. I see that Marion Baldus has a question. So I will turn your microphone red and you can click on it and turn it on. Please be so kind and present yourself first. You can now speak, it's green. Hello?
Who's speaking?
You can write a question on the chat if you want, because we cannot hear you. So we can use the chat. So I don't know, there seems to be a problem with the microphone from Marion Baldus. So, I see the question. I hope that the colleagues in Munich can see the question. I will read it. So, Marion from Mannheim University, is now in Boston, and she would like to ask, how do you define inclusive education in international context?
That's not easy to say. Maybe it's good that inclusive education to remember that all means all, Marshall Forrest says. So all children who are marginalized, need help, are in our focus when we speak from inclusive education.
Actually, we are using the UNESCO set definition of inclusive education, which was broadened with the Conference of Education Ministers, I think in 2008, not just focusing on children with a disability, focusing on all marginalized children. So this means all children have the right to quality education at the place where they are going for schooling or early childhood education or tertiary education, etc.
Thank you. And thank you, Marion, for the question. So, more questions or comments about the presentation? Yeah, I see we have a question. Simone Weininger. Please click on your microphone to turn it green and you can start speaking. Hello?
We hear nothing.
Hello, Simone. We cannot hear you. But you can write the question on the chat. We will wait a second, maybe she's writing the question.
There's another question
From Marion.
from Marion.
Ah, yeah, so...
Maybe I answered it already, the other person is writing. She's writing as far as she knows, in developing countries, they do not have inclusive access. Can you tell more about this? Actually, it depends very much on the countries. Some countries have excessive inclusive education laws already. Of course, it's quite difficult to implement these laws, but there are many positive examples in the various countries. Starting from in South Africa, they have White Paper 6 on inclusive education, where they have a free build system. They go a bit a special way because for them inclusive education, not everybody has to be in the same school, so they have inclusive education for children with mild learning issues, but for all children of society. Then they have resource centers which give access to mainstream children, plus also some children with learning difficulties or other difficulties who need more support. And then they have special centers for children with high level of support. So then there's another, we know it from Burkina Faso, where they try to bring everybody into the same classroom. We know one district where in each classroom they have 3 to 5 children with disability, plus all the other marginalized groups from society, plus many poor children in this country. So countries are on the way to provide access, but of course it's a long way, even though in Europe it's a long way and we are not yet there. But there are really many positive examples, and it's not, you cannot say they don't have access, because they are starting to provide access, and it just depends on the area how far they are. It depends also on the teacher training, it depends on the policymakers, and also on the stakeholders, how strong they call in the countries that their interests are taken care of. I hope that answers the question. If not, you are more than welcome to write me. I can send you some studies with some more information on this.
We have another question from Simone. I guess we have a problem with the microphones, and she wrote on the chat box. So Simone from the Cologne University, she asked if there is any data showing how inclusive early childhood education approaches are dealing with the plurality of languages in multi-ethnic, multilingual settings. The question is also on the chat box.
Yes. Sieht das nicht ganz, ne?
We don't see the full.
Okay. Sorry, now we can see the whole sentence.
So I can read it again. So the question is, are there any data showing how inclusive early childhood education approaches are dealing with the plurality of languages in multi-ethnic, multilingual settings?
Actually, we saw some studies from Latin America on this, but in the broad sense on this study we were not going into detail on this. But you can send us an email and I can send you the link we found while doing our studies.
So it seems so that you are interested in data, and we have some data. We collected a lot of contexts in which you are interested in, and it's a good idea that you send us an email and we can give you the details, the informations that you really need. That's okay for you?
So we have two questions. I will try to give the floor to Elisabetta Mina. I will turn your microphone on and you can now click on it. I see that you did it. Yeah. And now try to speak. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah,
great.
hello Elisabetta.
Hi everybody. Yeah, my name is Elisabetta Mina and I work for Save the Children Italy. And I work a lot on the topic of inclusive education, and we also have some programs that are targeting early childhood, the early childhood age. My questions would, I have a couple of questions. One, if you have examples, if you have come across during your research on some examples from of good early childhood, inclusive early childhood programs in settings that are very poor and very low resources. So I think you mentioned one, I can't remember now, it was maybe India. It was the beginning of the presentation, so it will be very interesting to know what experiences are there that seems to be successful, where there is some research going on telling us that they are working well. My second question would be, you mentioned the need to carry out more research, matching these three components, early childhood, inclusion, and development cooperation. And if you could mention any priority, any aspect that you would feel it's most important to to research on, what would be your priority, because there are many aspects you can do research upon. And if there is any possibility to partner, I don't know what is the GIZ doing at the moment in this field, but we do a lot, and we also partner with universities. I know something from Italy, but also local university, for example, in Mozambique. And so if there is possibilities to partner more on this, because it's very, very interesting. Thank you.
You have some facts?
Yeah, we were, as you mentioned yourself, the program from India is having good results. Actually, there were health workers trained for child development and using the child strengths-based approach. And they went into families and guide the mothers how to develop their children. So there were positive effects. The problem is long-term effects. You don't have many studies in developing countries. On long-term effects of early childhood education, it's more in countries of the north, especially in US. There are some studies, but it would be important to find out the role early childhood education can play in developing countries with assistance of development cooperation. And this could already answer also your second question. The problem is a bit this data you receive in such a long-term study. It will be available only after a long term, but we need now already data to show governments how important it is to invest in early childhood education. So this need for long-term studies of these three components together is a bit a problem for current needs of governments. So at the moment, I think it would be important to go this both ways, to have these long-term studies on the effects of early childhood education and to have short-term studies on how programs in different settings, either in very poor settings, as you say yourself, or in more urban settings where you have a mix of children and you can have a more inclusive kindergartens or early childhood education centers, how this works. Also how to see how approaches work going to families, which we have quite a number of approaches, and how approaches work of children being educated in centers, because it's quite a difference issue, and some small children, there's the question, do they need the parents more or should they be in centers? Do they need more development? So this is interesting, and it's especially interesting in development cooperation because in Europe we have a different family approach, and in countries of the south, again depending on their culture, there might be different family approaches and some things which are valid and working for the north. Some data might not be valid and working for the south. So it would be interesting to go into this area, and this means even not just researching in one country and giving these results, and these results might be working for everybody. It's not true, because there are so many different cultures in the south, so there might be interesting to do a selection of different groups of cultures with similar family concepts, etc., and research how the different approaches, family approach, institutional approach, complete inclusion, work in that areas, and then also in the other settings. Yeah. Does this answer your question? Okay, thanks. There was another question which was not put verbally from Juliane Schmucker, I think.
Yeah, I'm afraid that will be the last question because we are running out of time. but the GIZ team will stay online and for half an hour and will try to answer the other questions. You can now answer the question from Juliane Schmucker, and then we will have to finish the webinar for today.
Interesting. It's about the creation of networks for sources. Actually, I mentioned two of the networks which already provide resources. One is the Global Campaign for Education. They already have data and resources also on early childhood education, and also the Global Child Development. But of course they are not yet brought together. The idea is even UNESCO, even UNICEF, there are much more data information tools, whatever, going around also already in different languages. So the question is how those could all be aligned with each other to make a huge database where also communication can take place with, we saw it now on the refugee issues, they even have blogs on their webpage. Yeah, people can communicate with each other, researchers can communicate with researchers, with practitioners. So something like this I think would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Okay.
I think we can try to answer the last question, because there is just one question more on the chat room, and maybe you can answer it.
This is from Marion Baldus.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so maybe I'm sure that we can give you an answer. But please come in contact with me. I'm writing this time a book about children of Syria, and I'm collecting this times a lot of facts and data, and maybe there's something interesting inside these data for you. So please contact me. That's okay? Okay.
We will write the contact data in the chat after the webinar is finished, because, like I said, we will stay online half an hour, and we will give you now the opportunity to download the Science to Policy brief about inclusive early childhood education. So you can click on the file and download it. We will send an email to all the participants that enter their email address at the registration at the beginning, and we will send the Science to Policy brief, the presentation, and the link to the recorded webinar. So if you haven't entered your email address before, you can send us an email to our email address inclusive-education@giz.de. Our next webinar will be on Wednesday, 11th of May. It will be a webinar about refugees. And we will leave you now with our film about inclusive education. This is a normal YouTube video, so if it doesn't work, you have just to press play.
Going to school is not always taken for granted.
And we hope you will enjoy it. And once the film is finished, we will give you again the opportunity to download the Science to Policy brief. So thank you very much for your participation, and we hope that we will see you again at our next webinar. Thanks, and bye-bye.
For granted. For some children, it's a wish that will never be fulfilled, especially in our partner countries of international development cooperation. There, the chance for quality education is poor. For children with disabilities, it equals 0. It's not only children with disabilities that are deprived of their right to education. Refugee children and children from rural areas or indigenous populations are often also excluded from educational opportunities. 58 million children worldwide do not go to school. But the right to education is universal. Development cooperation and inclusive education must go hand in hand. So individual solutions to individual challenges have to be found. Article 24 of the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and the fourth goal of the Agenda for Sustainable Development give us momentum. It's important to translate research into good practice. Only this way our measures can be successful. On behalf of the BMZ, GIZ already works on concrete implementations. These include teacher training in Malawi, creative teaching methods in Guatemala, and widely accessible school buildings in Lebanon. The realization and evaluation of these initiatives are the starting point for further development of future projects. There are a lot of questions to which we still seek answers. Therefore, continuous development of solutions is particularly important to strengthen the basis for upcoming inclusive educational processes. There are a lot of steps need to be taken. Take them with us.